Welcome to the Your City podcast, where we get to know our neighbors so that we can be good neighbors. I'm your host, Aaron Williams, and before we get to our guest today, we're going to say a thank you to our sponsor. Our sponsor for today is Polymathic. Polymathic is focused on promoting community and local living. If you'd like to work with them on these goals, reach out with an email to contact@polymathic.company. Today, I'm joined by Mike Mouron, a local real estate developer that has a decorated history in the industry. We're going to talk about some of the development he has done in Homewood, his approach to making a project successful, and how he got involved in this line of work. Mike, thank you for coming onto the show.
Good morning, Aaron.
Yes. So we're in the Valley Hotel in Homewood. It's right next to the City Hall in the middle of downtown. Why did you choose Homewood to develop this hotel here?
Well, I really don't think it's my choosing Homewood to develop the hotel. I think it was the site kind of dictated what was done with it. Let me give you a brief history on it. Yeah. The property was owned for many decades by a man named Fred Hatfield, who had his auto repair shop on this corner. I'll be honest, I really had never focused on this corner per se. My development background was actually in student housing. I started a company called Capstone Development Corp. In 1990, and we developed student housing all over the country. And so when I retired from Capstone in 2012, I really wanted to stay in development, and I wanted to stay local. I laughingly told people the criteria, I had two categories. One, it did not involve me getting on an airplane because I had flown millions and millions and millions of miles. And it had to promise to be fun. I mean, I was at the age and station in life that I didn't have to work per se. And so if I was going to do anything, I wanted it to be fun.
Yeah.
And so anyway, apparently people had tried to get Mr. Hatfield's corner for decades without success. He would never sell. And I was asked, how in the world did you get Fred Hatfield to sell? And I said, well, you have to understand, he called me. And they said, what? And I said, Fred knew my sister, Marcia. And he liked Marcia, and I think he thought he likes Marcia so much, maybe her brother wouldn't be a bad guy either. And so he literally called me and said, I'm thinking about selling my property. I'd like you to tell me what you think it's worth. So I met with Fred because of his knowledge of my sister. And I told him what I thought it was worth. And then he kind of paused and he said, okay, what will you pay me for it? And I said, Fred, this is putting me kind of in an awkward position. You asked me to come tell you what it's worth, and then you asked me what I'll pay for it. I said, I hadn't really thought about it, to be honest, but I guess I'd pay you what I said it was worth. He said, it's not enough. And I said, well, Fred, you called me, so that's my honest opinion as to what it's worth. He said, it's not enough. I said, fine, So I went my own way, and I guess about 3 months later, the phone rang, and it was Fred's advisor. He said, Fred wants to get together again and talk about the property. So I got with Fred again, and we had pleasantries back and forth. And then he finally said, well, what will you pay me for the land? And I told him the same number. He said, it's not enough. And so, we did this for about 9 months or a year. One time it had been so long, we met, and he said, what will you pay me? And I said, Fred, it's been so long, I can't even remember what I offered you,
Yeah.
And finally, we come to terms, and I acquire the Hatfield. So the only other portion or parcel of land I really had my eye on was immediately next door, and it was the Little Professor. And so
that's the bookstore,
the
local
bookstore, right. So I came to terms with Paul Seitz and his wife, who were the owner of Little Professor. And in doing the due diligence, I found out that the owner of the Wolf Camera building, which was the next one to the north, actually had an easement over all of little professor's parking. So I went back to Paul and I said, Paul, you've got a problem here. The people next door have rights to park on your property, so it makes it impossible for anybody to acquire your property and develop it without first having to also acquire a Wolf camera.
Oh.
So anyway, I guess you could say, got forced to acquiring Wolf camera, which is a little bit of my falling out of a well. It proved to be a very good thing that I got forced into that, if you will. But that's how I ended up acquiring those properties.
That's an interesting phrase. I've never heard that, falling out of a well.
Well, I've been very lucky, so I don't fall into wells. I fall out of wells.
Yeah.
So anyway, here I was. Now I had a prime corner in Homewood. And if you realize there's really no national or even regional chains in Homewood except for Jack's Hamburgers. And I don't know if you realize, but the Jack's here in Homewood was the first location. And anyway, what I had originally planned was to get the land, clear it, and then put 2 retail food and beverage venues that heretofore couldn't come or wouldn't come to Homewood because there was inadequate reserved parking or exclusive parking. So I planned to take the sites I had contracted for and to put maybe 2 food and beverage venues in the middle of a sea of parking and be able to check that box, and the national chains pay the highest rent.
To attract them to come here.
To attract them to come to Homewood. But then as I began to focus on that and look around, I thought, wait a minute, Homewood does not have national chains, and there's a certain quaintness and everything to Homewood, but maybe because they don't have the national chains. And I'm not sure that, quote, coming from the outside, I wanted to be the person to break that tradition or that cachet or whatever. And so then I started thinking, okay, well, if not some national chains, what might work well here? I was aware of the hotel in Mountain Brook that was doing very well. And I looked at the hotel venues in Homewood, most of which were either older or not necessarily full service. And so I started thinking maybe a hotel would be an interesting play. Luckily, I went to the University of Alabama, and I was in the fraternity with a man named Kimmons Wilson Jr. Kimmons Wilson Sr. started Holiday Inns. So Kim, K-E-M, his family had been in hospitality all of his life. And in fact, he was now of the age, he's actually a few years older than me. His children were in the hospitality. So it was, you know.
You had this local expert.
I had this expert. He lives in Memphis where Holiday Inns was started. But anyway, I called him and he said, well, as fate would have it, he said, I've just made an investment in a company called Valor Hospitality. And he said, they're really a great company. I'd like to introduce you to them. He did, and I was very much attracted to the style of management as it was explained to me by the top people at Valor. And so I retained them to manage the hotel, and from that we began to put the team together. One thing, I've done a lot of development in my life, but I don't think I've ever had as many different people involved in a single development as is the case with the hotel.
Why do you think that is? Like, why did it take so many more people?
I don't know, but maybe it's just, you know, a hotel to me is not a real estate investment. It's a business investment. As somebody told me one time, jokingly, they said, you know, in a hotel, you're 100% vacant every morning. And so every day you're working to fill your property. Unlike, I told you we were in student housing. Well, we would lease student housing for an academic year. Once it was leased and occupied, usually in August, late August or so, it would be leased to those same people until July of the next year.
You're done.
You're done for a long time.
Yeah.
In the hotel, every day you're 100% vacant.
Trying to figure it out.
You're trying to release it.
Yeah.
And so, and then just imagine, there's so many different points at which a hotel operator can disappoint their customers. I mean, it starts with the valet to the people at the front desk, to say nothing of the appearance of the property itself. You get the front desk, then the bellman, then you have the housekeeping. Then if they go to your restaurant, you have everything from the maitre d' to the wait staff to the quality of the food.
So many points of contact where something can become, I don't know what the word is, but like where friction could get introduced.
Yeah, or violate their expectations, as I like to say. And so hotel is a very complicated form of business to operate.
So this is a completely new domain for you. Has it been a big challenge to get used to this type of business?
It was interesting. When I retired from Capstone, we were doing each deal was different, but we were doing student housing. Now, we did it on campus and we did it off campus, and we bought some existing and reconfigured. So there was always challenges. But once I retired from Capstone, I really wanted to get into a variety of different things, and I've certainly done that. Somebody says, how many hotels have you done? And I said, 3, my first, last, and only. And so I don't really see myself doing another hotel. Again, remember I told you I've traveled enough with business that I'm not really anxious to try to do things outside of the Birmingham market.
Yeah.
And I would not really want to do another hotel that would compete with the Valley. And again, I really didn't set out to develop a hotel. It was more I controlled a piece of land that seemed to cry out for a hotel.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting point where you had this land and it was kind of forced on you a little bit. Fred was coming after you, trying to get you to buy it. And in this, you looked at it and you said, what does this actual location need? And you let the community inform that decision. So once you kind of let the shape of Homewood inform what you were going to do, how did you go about connecting the community to your development and making it fit well with Homewood?
Well, I'd like to think everything I've done in Homewood has been first class. That's certainly been my objective.
Okay.
And I think it's obvious when you ride around Homewood, the quality of the housing, the quality of the public buildings, the schools, the city hall, everything, that I really set about to try to make the Valley Hotel a first-class facility. And I thought that if I achieved that objective, then the community would embrace it. And I thought that was a interesting part of the Valor hospitality approach. They said they're very food-centric. And they said it used to be that the restaurant in hotels were viewed as some of the finest dining in major cities. They said then over time, the food in hotels almost became an afterthought or a bad joke, if you will. And so they said they're talking about Valor Hospitality, our goal is to make the Ironwood restaurant, which is the name of the restaurant in the Valley Hotel, is to make it one of the most popular places for people in Homewood and surrounding communities to want to come and dine and have a glass of wine or meet friends or whatever. And they said if we're successful in doing that, then that vibe that will be created or that vitality will spill over to the guest in the hotel and will become contagious and will make it a pleasant place for people not from Birmingham who are renting rooms in the Valley to enjoy, and if they come back to Birmingham, hopefully stay again. So the whole intent was to make Ironwood and the bar and everything something that the people in Homewood would frequent, and they've certainly done that. And so, the interesting thing is, I don't know how true it is, but there was an article I read that said for every dollar people spend on their hotel room, they spend 2.5 times that amount on things other than their hotel room in the community. Now, that may be in the restaurant at the hotel, but also I think it means they leave the hotel and go to retail venues off the property and shop and dine and everything there. And there's been some other vendors in Homewood interviewed asking about the impact of the valley. And everyone I've seen has echoed that their business has increased because of people staying here.
Well, they come and they stay for a weekend or a week or something like that, and they try out it's called the
Ironwood.
Ironwood. They try out Ironwood, and then you don't want to eat at the same restaurant all week.
Well, of course not.
And so you go somewhere else.
Well,
we just went to New Hampshire, and that's exactly what we did was, hey, we're going to try out all the places that are around here. We're going to travel. That's what you do.
Well, I think that in considering a hotel and in speaking with Valor, they talked about how now that is an important part of the decision-making process for people as to where they want to stay. They want to be able to get out in the community and experience the different things. And of course, I think Homewood is such a pleasant area, and it's got such a diversity of interesting shops. And as I said earlier, most of them are operated by the people who own it, which I think gives a genuineness or a community feel that would be lost if the people in the shop were not the owners. If they were just employees who didn't care as much for the success as the people who own it do. So I think that's important, and I think that's also an important thing about the Valley Hotel. I have a number of partners in the ownership of this facility, but all of them are Birmingham based. And so I think it's important that I'm here often, and so are the other owners. And I think there's a certain pride that one takes when you have ownership in a piece of real estate.
Yeah.
And hopefully it shows in the attitude of both the staff and the owners.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you describe this tradition of like the hotel is supposed to be a place where people out of town can come and meet and integrate with the people in town. And so it's this opportunity for the external and the internal to kind of like mesh. But that tradition has been a little bit lost over time. That's interesting.
Well, I think I was speaking specifically about the food and beverage in the hotel.
Oh, okay.
But that's where a lot of times people meet.
Yeah.
And so, I think your point's valid. And so, again, I just cannot give enough compliments. I think it's amazing how many people unsolicited come up to me and compliment me on the hotel and the staff and the physical, condition of the property and everything else. And it's like I tell them, you're giving me far too much credit. It's Valor Hospitality that's, fulfilling your expectations.
Yeah.
And so,
okay. One thing that kind of sticks out to me here is you said that you wanted to focus on local when you retired. So you retired in 2012. And then since then you said you wanted to stay local because you didn't want to travel. Were there any other reasons that you had to want to invest locally?
Well, I enjoy what I do. I'm a very fortunate man. I mean, I'm 72 years old. I retired 10 years ago and could have gone about doing whatever most people do when they retire. Yeah. But as I said, I just enjoy what I do. And so the one nice thing is, since you enjoy what you do, I like to drive past it periodically. So I will, if I'm on an errand or something, I will invariably go out of my way to drive past a property I might own, just to make sure that the condition looks good, it's clean, the landscaping is
Do a little ocular inspection.
Sure. There's a lot to be said. I mean, I'm seeing Danny Hyatt, the general manager, walk by as we're speaking, and before you and I sat down for this interview, there was something I pointed out to Danny, and I asked him to address, and he did. I'm not. I like being able to drive by and see things like that. I'm not so sure the management of properties I own like me being able to do that.
Yeah, like a health inspector dropping in.
Yeah, you're coming in with your white gloves, or something. But anyway.
Well, with the hotel, and it's not just the hotel. You've also done developments in the Birmingham area as well, right?
Well, yes, and there was it was a public document. I entered into a development agreement with the city of Homewood, and in that document, they incentivized me to not only develop the hotel but also retail, especially facing 18th Street, which is the street right in front of the Valley Hotel here. Comes down from Vulcan, connects Vulcan to Homewood. And so I was involved with the building where Edgar's Bakery is now, and then also the building where Rodney Scott Barbecue and Little Donkey Mexican is located. Because I was, I guess, buying a good bit of property in Homewood, it seems like every time there was a parcel of land or a building that maybe could be purchased, I think I was on the real estate agent's speed dial, and they would call me, and then along with some other partners, we did the new branch location for Robertson Banking, and also did the old Western supermarket building where Cap Trust is now located. Earlier, I had done the building where Trustmark Bank is located now. And so I've got a new one under development where the Valley Mall used to be on 28th Street. I enjoy developing in Homewood. I think the vibe and vitality and everything is almost infectious.
Yeah.
I like the people here. The city officials are very reasonable and professional, and that's all you can hope for.
Yeah, they were very nice when I talked to them. We interviewed them for the show and everything. So with all of these different developments that you're doing in Homewood, a lot of investment going in, what level do you like to operate at as a developer? How, because there are so many different layers to this. Where do you like to find yourself at?
Let me answer that question in this manner. I tell people that when you start a company, it's like you may be at the peak of the pyramid, but the pyramid's not very tall. So you're not very far from the part of the business that probably attracted you to begin with. As the company grows, if you're still on the top of the pyramid and the base of the pyramid's getting bigger, then you're being pushed further and further from the part of the business that you actually originally enjoyed. So Capstone had grown to a company of about 1,000 employees. And you get to a company of that size, and it seemed like I was involved more with everything from insurance claims to lawsuits to employee issues to personnel issues to all the things that I didn't find fun at all.
Yeah.
And so
all this super sensitive stuff that really requires a delicate hand, and you're the accountable one, you're the responsible one.
The responsible. And so therefore it seems like the problems oftentimes get pushed upstairs, if you will. And so when I retired from Capstone, and I now have a staff of 4 people who work directly for me. So I went from 1,000 people to 4. And long-winded answer to your question, what I love is being right down in the weeds.
Okay.
The thing that I find most interesting is the intricacies of putting a real estate development together. One time I started to try to list all the different professions one might deal with in a major real estate undertaking, and I think I got to 40-something different professions.
Yeah, stuff that people spend, years perfecting and mastering and being able to operate in 40 different.
Well, it's just, everything
careers.
from the landowner to the landowner's agent to the closing attorney to the title company to the people who do the hazardous waste testing to the civil engineer to the marketing people. It just goes on and on and on. And that's what I find interesting. I think that's what keeps my mind active.
Yeah.
And I like putting the pieces together. A successful real estate development, a lot of times, it's like I told some university officials, the real estate development process is not necessarily that complicated if you take it step at a time. I would tell them, we can give you the choice and we can tell you the advantages or disadvantages of whichever route you may take.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you would find that difficult to probably make the right choice. It's just that in a real estate development, you come across maybe hundreds of forks in the road.
Mm.
And so it's not that any one question may be that complicated. It's just the scale of how many different forks in the road you come to.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's intimidating to a lot of people. And I laughingly, somebody told me one time, they said a real estate developer is a mile wide and an inch deep, meaning you touch on a lot of different things, but you don't necessarily have to be an expert in all of them, if any of them.
So it sounds to me like one of the things that you love the most about this job is the networking and the communication aspects of it. Is that true to say?
Yeah, it is. And just as I said, the ability to deal with all, if you were to look probably at my phone and saw the different emails from all the different people, and I could tell you which each of them does in the process, and you begin to appreciate the scope of things of this nature. And I think that's just interesting. It's I'm not an artist, I don't play a musical instrument, I don't do anything of that nature, but I like to think that putting together a successful real estate development is kind of an art form in itself.
But you have to have some kind of vision, right? So there's something inspiring you, there's something motivating you, and you have an idea in your mind how you want it to end up, right? So part of this challenge, part of this job is figuring out all the different people that you need to come together to build this thing that you're envisioning. And then the second part of that is communicating that vision out. So how do you approach communicating and aligning so many different people?
Well, I think you can tell by looking at me, I've been in this business a long time. Mm-hmm. So I've met a lot of very talented people, different people in this, professionals who will be involved in any real estate development may have an expertise in a different area. In other words, you may have an architect, just as the firm that designed the Valley Hotel, where their specialty is designing hotels. And they came from out of Memphis. They were recommended to me by, again, the Kimmons Wilson. Other architects may have specialties in retail. Others may have specialty in office. Mm-hmm. Others may have it in hospitals and things like that.
So the type of real estate matters.
The type of real estate matters. And that is not just the architects. It even extends to general contractors. Different general contractors are certainly different size. So for a project of a very large scale, you work with a different general contractor than you do if you're building a standalone 2,500 square foot food and beverage venue. And so I've been fortunate to be exposed to a lot of very talented professionals. And, one of the hardest things is when a firm with which you've had or have a very good relationship calls and says, I really would like to design that or build that or whatever. And you have to tell them, I've made a decision to go a different direction.
Yeah.
And I try to make that decision rather quickly. I communicate it
The way you don't leave people
broadly,
hanging.
and don't leave the people hanging, and give them an honest answer.
Yeah.
I think if you give people an honest answer as to the and it wasn't just an afterthought. I'd like to think it was pretty well thought out as to why I went a certain direction. Then I've always found people to be understanding. I have an expression that a lot of people have heard me say: I don't trade old friends for new friends. And so I try to always deal with people who I've worked with in the past who have done good work.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that people appreciate, and what you're doing in that aspect, I think, is building trust with people. It's like people can trust you that you're going to make a decision that is, in your mind, the best decision, and you're not making it to hurt anybody, and you're not being deceptive, and you're not going around behind people's back, and you're being forward with why you're making your decisions, and people can understand that. Even if they get a little upset about it, they walk away with an understanding, and that understanding of each other is super important to developing and maintaining a relationship.
Well, I'd even hope that they're not upset. I'd rather them think the word is disappointed. They would have liked to have been given the opportunity. They're disappointed that maybe I went a different direction. But I would hope that they're not upset because it's been explained as to the reason for mine. And that approach has just served me well during my entire career.
Yeah. Well, how, you've been doing this a long time. How can somebody who wants to get into this, who's, let's say a younger person who's trying to get into developing properties and wants to kind of follow in this career path, how do you get started in this?
It's funny you should ask that. A young man who interned for me, I guess, not this summer, the summer before, just emailed me and said he's entering his senior year in college and was asking pretty much the same question you just asked.
Yeah.
I said, I've had several people literally come to me and say, we'd like to become a real estate developer because we see successful ones make a lot of money.
Okay.
And I said, that is actually a terrible reason to get into any profession. I said, you should get into something that you're passionate about. I said, I've seen a number of people get into various lines of work because they thought they could make a pretty good living doing it. And oftentimes, soon after they're in it and they've got some years dedicated to it, they really wish they were doing something else. But all of a sudden, they've devoted their entire academic career to it, and they've spent 4, 6, 7, 8 years, in it. Yeah. And all of a sudden, they feel trapped. I was telling this young man, I said, try to figure out what you're passionate about. I think whatever you're passionate about, you'll be more successful. Mm-hmm. And if you're more successful, chances are that's the best way to make money. And don't pick the profession because of what you think is the outcome. Pick the profession because of, your passion. And I have always had an affinity for real estate. Can't really tell you where it came from. I mean, I graduated from Alabama in accounting, became a CPA, went to work for Price Waterhouse, left that to become chief financial officer of a public company. And the whole time I'm dabbling in real estate on the side. And finally, in my career, I jumped ship from accounting, even though it's been a great bedrock for my profession, and pretty much got into real estate full time. And but it's also interesting. I didn't start Capstone until I was 40 years old, so it's not like I did it real early in my career. So I tell Kathy and I have 3 sons, and The oldest, I think, will be 43 in August. So, and he has a 41-year-old brother and a 38-year-old brother. I tell them, y'all are only about at the age that I was at when I started Capstone. Yeah. So don't feel undue pressure. I try to tell young people, keep learning. I said, if you have a job where you think you're learning something, chances are you have a good job. And it's interesting that in my career, as I said, I'm an accountant, and when I went to as chief financial officer of the public company, I got into finance because we were constantly financing things, and that background actually led to some breakthroughs with Capstone that gave us some significant opportunities, and that led to the growth of Capstone. And all of these things are kind of accumulative over one's business experience, and that's as long as I've been in this business, I'm continuing to learn things. I think that's one reason I like doing developments of the nature that I didn't do at Capstone, such as hotels. I'm involved in an industrial park out in St. Clair County. I've done a number of historic rehabs. That's something I really enjoy doing. I think I've told people that if you do a historic building well, a historic building to me has a patina, just like older furniture. Antique furniture can have a patina that you just can't duplicate with new.
That's an interesting point. So your advice would be make sure you're passionate about if you want to get into this first. And then you said you dabbled a little bit before you kind of got into it full time. So start small, do some smaller projects, and then kind of see how you feel about it and let it scale up.
Yeah. Real estate development is a high stakes poker. If you get to a certain size, the size of the developments are not insignificant. And so if one is going to get into it, it would be better to start small and make sure that you get to test your hypothesis, without it being crippling should you fail.
Yeah. One of the things that I was curious about, you say that you've always had this affinity for real estate. You don't know where it came from, but you're in your late 30s, you're dabbling in real estate. What brought you to take that to say, you know what, I'm going to do this full time. I'm going to make my own company. I'm running at this full speed. What inspired you about that to say, I want to commit to this?
Well, I was doing real estate full time before. I was head of development for a number of companies. I was doing that full time. As to what pushed me to start Capstone, I probably got fired. My wife would laughingly say that, when we moved back from Montgomery back to Birmingham, we moved to Montgomery right as we were married. She said, Mike finally got fired from so many companies down there. He had to move back to Birmingham to, get another job. She's teasing to a degree, but I was always, I guess you'd say, pushing. I was never one to let status quo. And a lot of times, people get comfortable with status quo. And if somebody's pushing it, sometimes there can be some friction. Yeah. So a lot of times if I detected friction, I would just try to look for a situation where I thought there could be greater encouragement rather than resistance.
Yeah.
And so, when I started Capstone, we had already developed a number of student housing projects
prior to that.
Yes, prior to that, and some of the young people working with me at the time, and I was fascinated with the prospects of student housing. The company we were working for, I think, was surprisingly losing interest. I think they were more interested in commercial developments in major markets versus stick frame apartments in college markets, which sometimes are not large.
They were trying to move on to bigger.
They were trying to move
fish.
bigger fish, more glitzy. And I was fascinated by student housing. I had heard one time effective marketing is find a need and fill it. Well, we had found a need in student housing, and it was surprising to us that we were at the point we were at, and looking around, it was like not really anybody else was there.
So there was just this huge amount of opportunity that you saw.
There was. I mean, people would say there was student housing in the 80s, when I started looking at student housing, but it really was apartments designed for the conventional, meaning just
a family could, anybody could live here.
2-bedroom, 2-bath was the master bedroom, bathroom off the bedroom, smaller bedroom off the hall with the second bathroom off the hall.
Sometimes more than what a student would need.
Well, it was, and then they would try to rent and put 2 students in each, and you had different size bed, and it was a conventional floor plan. It was managed as conventional. It was interesting how many markets we found where the landlords almost had an adversarial attitude towards the student tenants.
Where do you think that came from?
I would take the opinion they didn't take the time to look at who their real market was. My point is, if you're in Auburn or Tuscaloosa or Starkville or Fayetteville or Oxford, Mississippi or Athens, Georgia, and that, who the heck do you think your market is? You're in a school that's got 30,000 students.
So they're like, no, I'm hoping to get families to come here and live here for multiple years. All these young whippersnappers coming in, going to leave in 2 years.
Yeah, and I think the perception was this is going to be an animal house. They're going to tear it up. They're going to
frat parties.
There's going to be beer cans all over, and we always found that. We found students are just like most segments of the population. They pretty much give you what you seem to expect of them or what you demand of them.
Yeah.
We would have very clear rules and regulations. They were reasonable, but we would enforce them emphatically. And what we found is a lot of times if we literally kicked out some student tenants because of behavior, a lot of other students would come into the office and say, I'm glad you got rid of them. They were really just making things unpleasant for other people. So what we found is the vast majority of students wanted a nice place to live. They wanted management that was friendly to them and courteous to them and welcoming if they were doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And, what they're supposed to is not very complicated. Pay your rent on time. Don't destroy the property. Be respectful of, this is not anything too complicated. And we would manage it. And it's like I used to say, if there's a beer can on the grounds, pick it up. To the staff, pick it up. Because if you leave that beer can one day, the next night there will probably be 30 beer cans.
You're sending a signal.
You're sending a signal is to, if the property is important to the management company, then it becomes important to the thing. If you followed me around today, chances are you would see me bend over and pick up some trash at some of the property if I'm on anything that I have an ownership or even if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
My sons own the office building where we are. If I walk in and I see trash, I'll pick it up and throw it in the trash can on my way in.
Yeah.
And I just find that, believe it or not, people see that. And it sends a message. And it's a very positive message, I think.
I agree with you on this. I do that when I go into Walmart at Gardendale. That's where I live. Every time I come out, I try to see if there's a piece of trash that I can throw away because, part of me, I'm doing a show about this. I obviously care about community, and part of me is like, okay, you have to care about where you live. This is the city that you live in. You got to take care of it, even if you're the only one. Hopefully you can inspire some other people to help you take care of it, but it's your city.
Well, like if I go on a walk, leave my house and walk, a lot of times I carry a plastic little small shopping bag with me.
Yeah.
And I'll just pick up trash as I go and then drop it in the, receptacle.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's just, if everybody did that, every place would be cleaner and more inviting than some places are.
When you go hiking, they have a phrase. It's like, leave it better than you found it, right? So it's like,
leave nothing but your footprints.
Exactly. Leave nothing but your footprints. Leave it better than you found it. It's like when you go to a place, see what you can do to make it better. Yeah. What can you do to make this environment a more comfortable environment for the people, for you and for the people around you?
I've never stopped to pick up trash that if anybody said anything, it was not positive. I think it sends a positive message, even if they don't verbalize it.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, going back to your career, you've done this for decades. Are there any projects that you have that you're like extremely proud of, that you'd like to talk more about, like why you felt so accomplished after doing these projects?
Yes, and this may sound self-serving or whatever. I've worked on some very large projects, and large is a relative term, but I mean projects of over $200 million of.
That's large, in my opinion.
And projects, anything like that to me is just business. And when I say just business, I mean it's kind of what I did. It was done for purely capitalistic reasons. I mean, that does, I'm a capitalist to the bone.
Okay.
But I think that doesn't mean, I'm a firm believer that capitalism and doing things well run parallel. I don't think they run at odds. Just like I said earlier, I think if you do things well, it has a better chance to succeed. Yeah. If it succeeds, that means your capitalism is being rewarded. Mm-hmm. So I very much see the desires of communities to run parallel to capitalism. So,
well, I think what you're describing is that it's the long tail, right? Of like, you're building a reputation, you're building your character, and you're building trust with people around you of like, hey, we gave Mike responsibilities and he turned around and delivered on those, and he delivered well on those. People who do the short-term gain are like, hey, if we do this and we don't deliver, and we like cut these corners right there, they're serving short-term benefit, but it is going to burn them in the long run. People are going to stop trusting you eventually. You like what you're saying, you need to be delivering and you need to be trustworthy over time.
Well, I used to tell people, remember we were doing student housing, and Capstone has probably worked on 75 university campuses mm-hmm. across the country. And nobody was more technologically advanced than universities. And I used to tell people, I said, if we do something poorly, that news will beat us back to Birmingham.
It'll be that fast.
It'll be that fast because all the university officials, if you think about it, the upper university officials have invariably been on multiple campuses. It's thought to get ahead, you can't just stay at one place and advance. Mm-hmm. It's perceived for your resume, you need to be in a number of different campuses. And so they all have friends across the country. And I said, if you do things poorly, that word will get out quickly. If you do things well, that word may not get out as quickly, mm-hmm. but it will be there that if you want to recommend that a university official to whom you're making a proposal, you can encourage them to check with other people, yeah. and then they'll at least be given a positive recommendation or a positive opinion of your performance. Yeah. The same is true now that I'm not in the student environment or university environment. It's just like in Homewood. The first projects we undertook here, I think there was a degree of comfort in selecting us, but we had not done anything yet. So it was especially important to do things and do them very well.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, long term, almost everything I do I have a very long term orientation. I tell people I have almost a generational orientation. I told you, Kathy and I have 3 sons. Well, we also have 8 grandchildren. All live within 3 miles of us. So my grandchildren will see things that I did, and I want them to feel good about it.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, because I'd like to think we've done things well in Homewood now. For instance, I was in front of the Board of Zoning Adjustments in Homewood just early last week, and we were asking for some variances. Well, I'd like to. First of all, I'd like to think what we were asking for was very reasonable, but I would also think that we had, when I say a sympathetic audience, I think we had a receptive audience on the council, if you will, because I think they realize that everything we've done here has been done first class, and so if you have that reputation within a market like Homewood, then I think there's a level of trust. Now, you can obviously violate that trust if you do something poorly, which we certainly do not plan to do. And I think the more you do, the more you build on that trust, and the more things become easier to do. And by easy, I don't mean you get to cut corners. I just meant people they're listening to your arguments with an open mind rather than a closed mind.
Gotcha. So these projects that you say that you're proud of, you were mentioning a $200 million project.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I got sidetracked.
No, we definitely got sidetracked talking about all other sorts of stuff.
The projects that I'm most proud of are probably some of the very smallest.
Okay. And
they are almost invariably done for charity.
Okay.
One of the things I think a experienced, successful real estate developer represents is the ability to pull things together and to get them done. And it's the very thing that we do for capitalistic reasons. Those same steps are needed for not-for-profit things. For instance, one of the first things we did was I'm passionate about the men and women in our armed forces, especially the ones who were injured in the armed forces. I had a pretty horrific motorcycle wreck, and I was in the Marine PLC program, which is platoon leader class program. And because of the motorcycle wreck, I never had to report to basic training. So I never served, and nor did my sons. And so I feel a real debt to those who served, especially those who were injured. My assistant one time, I'm sorry, it was my wife. There was an article in the newspaper about Lakeshore Foundation. And it was an article about the Lima Foxtrot program, they call it. And it's weekend courses that Lakeshore does for injured military. And they bring the injured military in and some family members to Birmingham from across the country. And what Lakeshore does is it exposes the injured military to physical activities that maybe the injured warrior did not know that they could still do.
Yeah. And
Lakeshore pushes them and encourages them and has them. They have people who are blind water skiing.
Oh, man.
They have,
And that's something that person probably thought is like, I'll never do again.
Yes. And so Lakeshore really does a wonderful job. And in fact, I saw Jeff Underwood yesterday at lunch, and Jeff was the executive director from the time Lakeshore was founded until like a year ago or less, like 32 years or something, Jeff was the executive director and did an incredible job. But anyway, my wife says, this looks like something you could, be interested in, because she knew of my passion for the injured military. So we went out to Lakeshore. That's when I met Jeff. And after hearing that the injured military stayed in effect, a dormitory on the campus, but that there was no place for the family to stay, and they had to stay in hotels around the area.
Yeah.
Well, that was, according to Jeff, and logically defeating the purpose of bringing the families to Birmingham as a family unit. If the injured military was spending the night in one place and his family was spending it somewhere else. So we committed to build some cottages on the Lakeshore Foundation grounds. And I guess that was one of the very first things that we did. And I set about trying to get, again, as I said, if you're a real estate developer, you deal with people who provide materials, subcontractors who do all the, the type work, architects who do the designing. So we set about trying to get the people in the various trades to do their work for free or at a deep discount.
Yeah.
And I've told people, I said, I hate asking for money, except when it dealt with the injured military. Then I would almost be incredulous if I would ask people for something and they would refuse. It would be like, wait a minute, maybe I didn't make this clear.
Yeah.
This is for injured military. You're sitting there healthy and happy, and this person maybe lost their legs. Maybe you want to rethink your answer.
Yeah.
And so we were able to get so much donated, and then we did naming rights throughout the property.
What is naming rights?
Oh, a building is named after somebody would pay to name their one of the cottages after their father who fought in World War II, or named the bench after somebody.
I see that at like botanical gardens and stuff like that.
Yes. Well, I laughingly said this was a little bit like NASCAR. If it held still, I was going to try to stick a naming right on it to raise money.
Yeah.
We ended up completing the development, and I think we turned over something like $400,000 to Lakeshore to.
Wow.
So we gave it to them free and gave them money to boot.
Yeah.
I thought the most interesting.
We'll pay you to do this.
I thought the most interesting thing too was, it seemed like when people gave product, they didn't give the lowest grade. They gave the top.
Yeah.
The people who sent the roofing shingles sent the 30-year warranty architectural profile shingles. The people who provided the windows, it was the top of the line. The people who did, everything was top of the line.
The people that you were working with really stepped up.
Really stepped up. And not only the product, but it was interesting because I was talking to some of the subcontractors, and they said, I've never seen my workers take more pride in what they're doing than this project. So it just, everything just went swimmingly. We dedicated it on Veterans Day, 2010, and that was a moving thing. I mean, the cottages were full at that point of families, and you get to hear the stories of. One mother and she was there with her son, said that when he was injured, he was so bandaged and everything, she could only recognize him by the bottom of his feet.
Oh, man.
And, you hear stories like that. And so that was a lot more rewarding. Than just opening a facility for which you got paid.
I can absolutely understand that.
And then, we've... and it's funny how even those things kind of lead one to the other. Someone asked me to be in some advertising, and it was to be the picture was to be shot at Lakeshore Foundation, the cottages. And so I said, I'll only do it if there's an injured military person.
Yeah.
And so the injured Army vet that came was actually wearing an Alabama basketball jersey. And I said, what's with the Alabama basketball jersey? And he said, I play on the wheelchair basketball team.
Oh, cool.
I said, I didn't know Alabama had a wheelchair basketball team. I said, it was between shots. And I said, tell me about it. And he started telling me, and it was like, we have to get to the rec center at 5:00 because that's the only way we can be sure of getting a court, because, we don't have our own facility, and our chairs are stored in a closet, and sometimes they're hung up so high that those of us who are restricted to a chair, others are amputees and can put on a prosthesis and stand up or whatever, but he said those of us who are limited to a chair can't even reach up and get our game chair from our day chair. And so I said, I can't believe Alabama, with its athletic department, doesn't have facilities better than that. And he said, whoa. He said, we're not part of the athletic department. We're under the School of Education. And he said, Alabama does no less than any of the other schools that have wheelchair teams. He said, I'm not complaining. I'm just, he said, you asked me about the thing, and I'm telling you. But he said, Alabama does as much as anybody. So I went back and was talking to my wife, and I said, that's just still. I mean, I heard what he said, but I can't believe that.
Yeah.
So we went and had a meeting with the university, and it turned out that they had planned for an adapted athletic arena and had it designed and budgeted and everything. Yeah. They were waiting just for the lead donor to come along. Well, Kathy and I became the lead donor,
and there you came.
And there we, I mean, this literally transpired the first lunch. I mean, I asked her to step outside, because when we went to the lunch, we not only had the president of the university and there, but there were like 10 of the adapted athletes. Mm-hmm. And when you hear their stories and everything, and then my sons get tired of hearing me say that, everything gets down to attitude and effort. I said, those are the only two things you can control. Everything else is outside of your control. Mm-hmm. And I said, to see the attitude of those adapted athletes who have been dealt some pretty serious challenges, and their attitude is always positive. And then to see the effort of them just getting around day to day, having to, get in a chair and get in and out of a car and get to class and everything. I said, the attitude, the effort is intimidating. And so I was very much attracted to that. So we committed to be the lead donors, and that has proven to be just an incredibly emotionally rewarding thing. Whenever Kathy and I go to the university, and like just recently, they have a summer camp for children who are in wheelchairs. And it's just like my grandchildren are going to summer camps now, and they're going off all directions and doing all different type of activities. Mm-hmm. But at the Alabama Adapted Athletic Arena, they have a camp, and there were 70 children, ages, I think, 12 through 17, from all over the country, and they were all in a chair, and they were being taught by the coaches and the Alabama teams, how to play basketball out of a wheelchair better than they were doing when they came.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to do while working on this show is actually interview a couple of different charities or people who are working with charities and stuff like that. And there's really not a shortage of that type of stuff around to get involved in. In Gardendale, there were 2 charities that were operating. Here in Homewood, you've got the Exceptional Foundation. It's like
incredible.
You can volunteer, you can donate. Like, there are ways to support these people who are, doing these life-changing services for people.
I've always, there's never a shortage of, and the vast majority are very viable and worthwhile. I mean, you named the Exceptional Foundation. That's an incredible facility here in Homewood, along with Lakeshore Foundation. So so many of them are viable, but I like to think too, I think it's maybe more valuable, and it's certainly more rewarding, I think, for the person giving, if they give of their time and talents more than just write a check.
Yeah.
I think if you do more than that, it's a lot more fulfilling.
Yeah, you're getting more involved, and giving money that you've earned is very different than giving labor. Giving your energy and your time and meeting those people, making those connections, and you get to see the impact of your efforts.
Well, it was interesting. You talked about money you earned. Because we were the lead donor for the Adapted Athletic Arena, we in effect bought the naming rights. And I told the couple who started the adapted program at Alabama, it's Margaret Strand and Brent Harden, and they're a married couple. She did not take his name, but they're a married couple. And they started it from scratch. I had told them I was going to name it in Kathy's honor. And I said, please get as many people as you can for the dedication ceremony. I said, make sure the team's there, make sure this and that. Well, the whole time was we were going to name it in their honor. But if I had told them that, they would have probably minimized the crowd, or whatever. It felt like they were inviting it for their own benefit. Yeah. So I told them I lied and told them it was for Kathy. And so they had a big group there thinking, we pulled the switcheroo and
pulled the rug out from under
and named it after. And it's like I said, and you alluded to it earlier in the presentation. I said, Kathy and I bought the rights to name it after ourselves, but we didn't earn the rights.
Yeah.
And I said to earn, because I said, Bob Pierce had said when your university names a building after you, it's one of the highest honors. And I said, I believe that to be the case, but we bought the rights. We didn't earn it.
Yeah.
And I said, but there are two people who did earn it. And that's, and we named it after them. And so here again, that was emotionally rewarding.
Yeah.
Every time we go into that building, seeing the athletes, seeing their families, a lot of times it's interesting. You look at the eyes of the family members whose children are out doing that, and you can see that they're very thankful to have a facility. It's the only one in the country, by the way. It's the only one in the country on a university campus.
Gotcha.
That's specifically for adapted athletes, people with mobility issues. Quite a facility. Fred Hunter. Have you ever seen the Absolutely Alabama series?
No.
That's if you remind me, I'll send you the little link.
Okay.
A man named Fred Hunter he finds little unique things about Alabama and does a little show on it. And it's actually very, I think you would enjoy it.
I probably would. If you could go back, what kind of advice would you give yourself and say, hey, this is stuff that I've accumulated over the years. Here's information. Here's stuff that would help you out. What kind of advice would you give yourself?
I'd probably give myself the advice to try to not work so hard and develop a hobby.
Okay.
Between having young children and working hard, I felt like I did nothing but work and family and work. And I didn't develop a hobby that I'm passionate about. I do a lot of things, but I do them and I enjoy it. But it's not anything that I don't read books about hunting or fishing, or I don't play golf. I don't play tennis. I don't, which, makes me a very boring person at cocktail parties. And I was telling our youngest son one time, I said, don't do what your father did and not develop a hobby. And our youngest son, Lewis, said, well, Dad, you like to bush hog. And I said, oh, that's great. I like to cut grass with heavy equipment. I said, doesn't that sound interesting? You know, surprisingly, he's right. Bush hogging a field that's rough is immediate gratification. You put in a couple hard hours and you look back and it looks good. And so much of real estate development is such a slow process. This Valley Hotel, I worked on this thing for years.
Yeah, before it got to a point where it's like you could appreciate it.
Yeah, but and so sometimes you put in so many years. That's another reason I think sometimes the satisfaction is almost one of relief of finally getting it done rather than a great sense of joy or accomplishment.
Yeah. I can let it go.
I'm glad that's done, and rather than, whoopee.
So you mentioned your family, your sons, your grandchildren. How do you balance? Because you're in retirement right now. You could, if you wanted to, spend every waking hour that they're awake. You told me earlier you wake up pretty early. Every hour that they're awake with them. What is your approach to balancing these retirement projects that you're pursuing with time that you would spend with your family, and just making sure that everything is taken care of?
Well, I told you we have 3 sons, 3 daughter-in-laws, and 8 grandchildren.
Yeah.
They all live within 3 miles of us. Last night we took 2 of them to a movie and out to dinner. And then
I got to ask, what movie did you watch?
Minions.
Ooh, did they like it?
They liked it. Tomorrow night we have 2 others spending the night with us. We offered to go up to pick one up at camp, but his father said I'd rather go by myself and spend some one-on-one time. So my wife, especially Kathy, and we spend a lot of time with family, and so I don't really find, we try to go to some of their athletic events, when they're playing various sports. We never miss an event of any significance at their school. We're in 3 different grandparents clubs because we have children at 3 different elementary schools in the Mountain Brook system.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to think, especially my wife, but I'm there often. And so I don't think that I need more time to do things like that.
Okay.
I think it's important. I think it's important as people age to try to find things that they can do themselves together, because I've seen too many times where grandparents maybe give so much attention to the grandchildren, and then children grow up and have their own life, which they should.
Yeah.
And they go on, and then I've seen, unfortunately, too many times where the grandparents or whatever feel like, wait a minute, they've forgotten me, Well, they're young, they're starting their own families, they're doing things like that. That's life.
Yeah.
And so I want to try to make sure that I have a balance of things that interest me personally, and then still have the time to do things with family. Yeah. I don't want to make it one or the other. And I know if it's all work, somebody says that's sad. I think if it's all family, to a degree, that can become sad as people, as I say, as people age and the family moves on.
Where we're at right now in, America, people tend to move away and go to different colleges all around the country. And, when they're out there, they're going to be meeting friends, and they're going to have their own careers, and they're going to have their own things consuming them. And you don't, like you're saying, want to put all of your effort into that. So that way, when it gets to that point, you're still okay. You have your own things that you're doing.
I can remember as my parents were aging, my mother would complain that I wasn't spending enough time. And my father would always, say, Gloria, he's got his own life to live. And so I think just like anything, I think you used the term balance. I think you strive to reach a balance, and it's never perfect, but I'm comfortable within my own skin as to the amount of work and family. As I said, I wish I had a hobby or two I was passionate about, but.
Well, I've got two last questions for you. Our theme for this season is how to be a good neighbor. So what are some ways that the people of Homewood can be good neighbors? How can people be better neighbors?
I think Homewood as a community is very involved with events going on. I have personally seen that sometimes I think the people are not as well informed as they should be.
Okay.
And I think a lot of times it's easier. Seems like it's easier for people to get upset about things and be vocal than it is to look at things and see what's positive about it and to be vocal. And so, there was a rezoning effort, a major rezoning effort that the city of Homewood was trying to undertake. And if people aren't in the business of real estate development or whatever, they may not realize it, but Homewood has a very complicated hodgepodge of zoning pockets and everything, and rules that seemingly are waived more than they're enforced.
Okay.
And I think the city fathers really tried to simplify, and in simplifying, really try to maintain and retain what makes Homewood special. I think a few rabble-rousers tried to find little bits and pieces and to stir up the population. When I say inappropriately, I mean I don't think if people had really dug into the nuances that they would have had the problem that seemingly manifested itself.
Yeah.
So I guess back to I think the people of Homewood could be better neighbors if they made sure that they were fully informed as to the nuances of things.
I can see what you're saying with that, because like you're saying with negative news and stuff like that, it sparks such an emotional reaction. People react to it so fast, right?
Right.
Whereas, if something good happens, there are so many good things that happen every single day that you just walk by and don't even notice, because that's normal, right? Like, I went to the grocery store and the person was extremely pleasant to me and super nice, and I left. Yeah, normal.
Right.
It doesn't stand out. It doesn't. But that interaction right there is a positive takeaway. It makes your city better, and people don't recognize those things. But that person was rude. That exact same person, that exact same experience, but now the person's rude. It's like, I got to go tell people about this.
Right.
That stands out. So that negative news really sticks in people's minds, and people, I don't know what it is, but they want to talk about it more.
Well, it's just, that's always the case. Whenever we have a zoning meeting, it was always easier to get the people who opposed it to the meeting rather than the people who supported it.
Yeah.
And you could have 80% support, but it was the 20% who showed up all wearing the same color T-shirts and would have the city officials think it was a groundswell of opposition.
Yeah. So you have this small group of extremely vocal people, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Right. And I saw that, and it's In making that comment, you can look at all I've done in Homewood. The failure to adopt the new zoning didn't impact me. And so in making the comment, all I would be telling anybody who may listen to this is make sure that you really understand what's in that. Don't let somebody else tell you what's in it. Read it.
Yeah.
And
Seek to understand.
and I think if more people did it, I think if some of the people who opposed it had read it and had those same people become proponents, then it would have swayed other people. Pretty much all the population was hearing was negative from a few rabble-rousers who, I think if you peeled the layers of the onion back, they had a self-serving reason for opposing it. But be that as it may, if the other people had read it and realized, wait a minute, what I'm concerned about is actually strengthened. It's enhanced by this new. Then I should support it, and I should stand up in the meeting to at least counterbalance the
other voices.
Other voices.
Yeah. So be more informed, seek to understand, and don't be quick-tempered. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, or just like I said, is a zoning document. This was a very expansive document.
Okay.
And too many times I'd hear people stand up in a public meeting and voice a concern, voice a heartfelt concern, that if they had read the thing, they would realize it was what they were expressing was not included in it. And yet when the city officials would try to stand up and point that out, it was almost like they'd be shouted down, again. And
that right there, if somebody's trying to explain something to you and you're shouting them down, you're not trying to understand.
Yeah. And that's what I saw. I saw too much about that situation. And as I said, I can make that statement. It hasn't slowed me up because nothing I was asking for really was impacted. But I did see that the city spent a lot of time and not an insignificant amount of money to try to make things better, and it just got railroaded by a few people.
I see. Okay. All right. What do you think the city of Homewood should focus on next?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think the city of Homewood is doing so many good things right now. I mean, they have beautiful parks, the improvements on 18th Street with the landscaping and the angled parking and the lighting and everything is good. I know this approvals I just received last week for the redevelopment of what I call the Valley Mall required me to put in a sidewalk that I was not planning to, so we had to make some adjustments in order to create enough space to put in a sidewalk.
Yeah.
So the city's trying to increase its already pretty remarkable walkability, if you will.
Yeah.
I think that's positive. It would be hard for me to say what the city of Homewood should focus on. I think there's a consideration about maybe changing the form of government.
Yes, there is right now. They're talking about hiring a city manager. They're putting together some people to study that and, so that they can inform the public and then the people can vote on it.
I think that may be a positive thing for this reason. In doing all the developments that we've done in Homewood, if Homewood had a city manager, then you would kind of have the consistent person who you could go to, who you could lay out what you want to do, why you want to do it. And then that person would know his or her own city well enough to know where they needed to go to get the input and everything. Absent a city manager, then what we were dealing with was a part-time mayor. And when I say part-time mayor, I mean it's not a full-time job. The mayor always has,
Sure,
be it the current one or the former one, they always have another job. You have a consistent city attorney, but he is not an employee of the city. He's hired. You have, it's just, and one other thing, Homewood has the largest city council by number in the state of Alabama.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of city council people, all of whom have their own opinions about things. You have a part-time mayor. You have, the city attorney who's, Mike Kendrick. He's readily available and I think has done a great job for the city of Homewood for decades. But it's a little bit of hard to seemingly get a focus and a consistent approach. I think the city of Homewood could benefit by having a city manager. I know that Mountain Brook has a city manager. Vestavia has a city manager. I've dealt with both of those, and it's just, as I said, it's a focal point and makes things, I think, a little bit more fluid.
Okay.
Or not, maybe the opposite of fluid, a little bit more consistent.
Gotcha.
So anyway.
Okay. Well, was there anything that you wanted to close out with, Mike, before we end the show?
No, but since this is, yes, since this is about the city of Homewood, as I've told anybody with the city that I've spoken to, including the mayor who I saw at lunch yesterday, I appreciate every opportunity that I've been given in Homewood, and in turn, we've tried to do our best to make the community proud. Homewood's a very focused on buying local and doing that, which I think is a very positive thing. So I'm glad to be playing a small part in a city that I find very attractive.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening to the Your City podcast. I hope you enjoyed our talk today with Mike. This is our last episode for this season, focusing on Homewood, Alabama, and we would love to do another season of the show focusing on a brand new city. There's more that we would like to do with this idea, and we would appreciate any support in helping us achieve our goal of creating better communities, not just for Homewood, but for other cities as well. Thank you again for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.